The desexualized mind creates man, not in the moralistic sense we are used to hearing. It is not about chastity or puritanism. It is not a denial of the body or a crusade against desire. It is something deeper, more subtle, and infinitely more transformative. The mastery of attention, the ability to conserve mental energy in a world that constantly tries to steal it. And of all the attention-grabbing factors of modern life, there is one that operates stealthily, instinctively, and compulsively: hypersexualization. Bruce Lee understood this even before the advent of the digital world. He saw the mind as a precision instrument, but no instrument functions effectively when it is unbalanced, vibrating in 1,000 directions at once. The first step, then, is not to amputate desires, but to channel and redirect the energy previously expended on scattered impulses and transform it into presence, intention, and clarity. Bruce said, "The consummate warrior is the average man with impeccable focus, but the problem is not desire itself, but the constant state of distraction it engenders when mismanaged." Look around you. Notifications, images, videos, ubiquitous sexual stimuli, social media, TV shows, music, advertising. It's not just the body that's bombarded, it's attention that's constantly under attack. It's the mind that's gradually losing its sovereignty. Anyone who gives in to these urges dozens of times a day, passively or actively, begins to live fragmented lives. You become unable to maintain a project long enough. Your memory weakens, your willpower declines, and anxiety replaces confidence. It's a waste of energy. And when we talk about desexualizing the mind, that's what it's all about. Restoring the integrity of your focus. Life energy, called Ti or Jing in Eastern traditions, is directly linked to attention. Bruce Lee was a man of practice, not words, and in his practice, centering energy was the way forward. He understood that sexual energy is neither taboo nor sinful, but a force, one of the most powerful. This is precisely why it must be taken seriously. In internal martial arts, there is an ancient principle: to transmute this energy, not to repress it, but to transform it into creativity, presence, and courage. This same impulse that creates life can also inspire ideas, projects, training, and actions. A simple example: the disciplined artist who gets up early, sits down to work in silence, and immerses himself in a task for 3 or 4 hours straight. Not only does he practice his art, but he also conserves his energy. He neutralizes the influence of dopamine, and over time this manifests itself. The brightness of his gaze, the firmness of his posture, the way he speaks show that he is not exhausted, because he is not wasting energy. This kind of integrity is increasingly rare because it requires a mind that hasn't been tamed by the algorithm. Bruce Lee became stronger because he refused what took him away from his center. His mind wasn't chastely pure. It was functional, sharp, strategic. That's why he said, "Energy flows where attention goes." This person's mind focuses primarily on what's essential. By eliminating the constant overload of impulses and beginning to retrain their senses, they experience a more lasting and serene pleasure. The pleasure of being fulfilled, the pleasure of acting with purpose. Life ceases to be reactive and becomes deliberate. And this brings us to the third point: fluidity. Be like water. This expression has become almost a cliché, but few truly understand its essence. Water doesn't cling, doesn't desire, doesn't force. It adapts, flows, and penetrates even the hardest rock without violence. Desexualizing the mind doesn't mean giving up pleasure. It means not allowing yourself to be dominated by it. When compulsive desire disappears, inner freedom is born. And this is what allows a person to act with fluidity and precision, even under pressure. They don't twist internally. They don't wage invisible wars. Water doesn't fight against itself. Think of an important conversation, a negotiation, a physical performance, or even an intimate moment. When the mind is clear, free of recurring images, free of all constraints, the body reacts with astonishing naturalness. There is lightness in the gestures, clarity in the words, truth in the gaze. This is what it is: a mind that knows when to stop, that knows how to remain silent, that knows how to act without being pulled in 1,000 ways at once. Bruce Lee trained with an almost monastic focus, not out of an obsession with control, but because he understood that the body is an extension of the mind, and if the mind is distracted, the body falters. Sexual obsession, when constant, damages this connection. The person begins to live in a state of constant anticipation, endlessly projecting the next image, the next fantasy, the next escape. This makes her less present, less sensitive to the moment. Her body reacts poorly. Her reflexes slow, her vision blurs, and her energy dwindles. In martial arts, this lack of presence is deadly. In everyday life, it also has consequences: poor decisions, procrastination, loss of attention, and a kind of diffuse anxiety that many feel without being able to identify. The antidote lies in restoring order between body and mind, by treating the body not as an object of pleasure, but as an instrument of lucid action. Those who can live this way possess more than self-control. They possess self-mastery, and this results not from a blind denial of desire, but from a clear understanding of its place. And what Bruce Lee cherished most deep down was this freedom. Free from dogma, from empty repetition, from cultural conditioning. He said, "Absorb what is useful, reject what is not, add what is uniquely your own." And that applies here as well. To desexualize the mind is to stop being a reflection of external demands, to stop reacting like a machine. It's about regaining autonomy over one's own desires. An internally free man has nothing to prove to anyone. He is not defined by the number of his conquests or by abstinence. He seeks neither purity nor virility. He is simply whole, acting from within. This integrity is special because it requires a confrontation. Not external, but internal. It's easy to fall into the stimulation-reward cycle offered by hypersexualization. Everything is immediate, superficial, and easily accessible. But this path comes at a price. The mind becomes accustomed to reacting to the slightest pleasure. It becomes impatient, undisciplined, and unable to shut up. And it's at this point that many give up, because the initial discomfort of mental desexualization is real. The mind deactivates itself from all stimulation, but if a man goes through this process with courage and perseverance, he emerges with a clarity few know. Bruce Lee understood the value of this kind of discomfort. His training wasn't just physical, but existential. Through the body, he explored the mind, and by training it to resist distractions, he discovered a higher form of freedom. Not the freedom to do what one wants, but the freedom not to be dominated by one's desires. This is the key. The man who is not a slave to his own desires becomes dangerous. Not in the destructive sense, but in the broader sense, he becomes unpredictable in the face of the system in which he operates, which attempts to control him with promises of immediate pleasure. He doesn't react as expected. He doesn't let himself be seduced by this same marketing. He doesn't connect, doesn't give in, doesn't get lost. He makes decisions, chooses what he eats, who he spends time with, what he reads, what he watches. And these decisions aren't moralistic, but strategic. He preserves his attention, his clarity, his energy. This applies to all areas. A writer who learns to stay focused creates better. An athlete who doesn't distract himself from random desires performs better. An entrepreneur who doesn't live a prisoner of his impulses builds with more stability. Even in relationships, the impact is visible. A man who doesn't sexualize everything he sees is more sensitive. He listens better. He sees the person beyond appearances and, as a result, connects more deeply or withdraws more quickly if necessary. He's not searching. He's living with a purpose. And there's nothing mystical about it. It's a practice like any other. This requires attention, patience, and method. And since all training begins with the basics, you first need to notice the moments when your mind is invaded by an automatic desire. This happens hundreds of times a day, sometimes with an image, sometimes with a memory, sometimes with a simple scroll on your phone. What do you do in those moments? A click or a pause, an unconscious action or a lucid look? Then comes the redirection. Energy that would otherwise be scattered must go somewhere. This is where many fail. They repress without transmuting, but the mind does not function in a vacuum. Bruce Lee knew this. That's why he focused on action. A disciplined mind only sustains itself if it is engaged in something important. Training, writing, building, creating. You don't fight desire with emptiness, you fight it with direction. Over time, the mind adapts and begins to operate at a different frequency. We take pleasure in creating, learning, and growing. What was once uncomfortable, silence, waiting, concentration, becomes a source of satisfaction. The body, previously conditioned to tension, relaxes. Our eyes stop searching for stimulation every moment. Changes in breathing, posture, walking, speaking, and behavior. This is mind control, and it begins with the desexualization of the mind. But it must be made clear once again, this is not a war on sex or pleasure. Sex, experienced with awareness, presence, and true connection, is one of the most profound experiences a human being can have. The problem is not the act itself, but the compulsion, the soulless repetition, the addiction to constant arousal. The desexualized mind does not deny sex. It integrates it, purifies it from the contamination of pure desire, and thus elevates it. Bruce Lee did not write treatises on sexuality, but his principles refer to them. When I said that martial arts are based on self-knowledge, I was saying that every gesture, every reaction, every impulse is an opportunity to observe oneself. And that mastery of the body begins with mastery of the mind. So when I trained, I wasn't just fighting, I was perfecting myself. And that's what it's all about, refinement. Those who refine their mental energy become both more sensitive and stronger. He perceives more and suffers less. He feels more and loses himself less. For his mind is not a battlefield between impulses and desires. It is a clear, silent, and pure space. When something enters, it is by choice, not by intrusion. When something leaves, it is intentional, not by automatic rejection. And this type of man is increasingly rare because it requires patience, vigilance, and the courage to face his impulses without a mask. But it is this man who builds, who creates, who inspires, who guides, who leaves a legacy. The other, the one who lives between stimulation and response, between pleasure and emptiness, between dopamine and guilt, is only another ghost, a specter of himself, a man who could have been, but who never allowed himself to be fully. The desexualized mind creates man because it restores his fullness, his presence, his center. This is the secret of mental mastery. It's not about purity or repression, but about freedom. And as Bruce Lee would say, freedom is found in discipline.